The Sony Spider-Man-less Spider-Man universe is dead. But on the bright side, by clicking on this video, you already have a bigger Spider-Man presence here than in this entire cinematic universe. So let's bid it farewell in fashion, shall we? My name is Ren, and this is my review of Kraven the Hunter. Welcome back, film family, and thank you for joining me for the final review in the Sony Spider-Man-less Spider-Man universe, or as it was officially and embarrassingly titled, The Spunk, where we follow the story of Sergei Kravinoff, whose complex relationship with his gangster father Nikolai starts him down a path of vengeance with brutal consequences, motivating him to become not only the greatest hunter in the world, but also its most feared. And if you're familiar with my channel at all, you will not be surprised to hear I've just never been on board with this cinematic universe from the start. And ironically, the year when it dies is the year that was bookended by their biggest output with Madam Web, Venom Let There Be Carnage, and now Kraven the Hunter. What you will be surprised to hear is that I feel they left the best for last. Do not get me wrong, I won't be here telling you that Kraven the Hunter is a good movie, but I've never had as good of a time watching these spunk movies as I did with Kraven the Hunter, which is an absolute disaster piece. It is such a formless piece of content that was regurgitated into theaters around the world this past weekend, and there is so much to discuss because you will not believe what happens in this movie unless we discuss it open spoiler style. And that's exactly what I will be doing in this video. The film has been out for like 4 days or 5 depending where you are in the world at this point. This will be a full-on spoiler review because there's no way I can hide away all the good juicy secrets this film left outside the trailers. At points while watching this film, I had to think to myself, what the fuck am I watching? It plays it like a serious brooding drama in one scene, only to dive into full camp in the next. It's tonally all over the place. It lacks any character, story, plot, logic, consistency. It is full-on, authentic self-parody. It's a film that lacks any identity at all, like so many of these movies have, because this entire universe doesn't know what it wants to be. Sony does not know what they want this universe to be because they're not sure if they're stepping on any toes. That's why this is all connected to Spider-Man, but they're so ashamed and embarrassed to say that it is. To the point, this was supposedly going to build up to the Sinister Six. There's 5 characters! There's not even 6 of them! It's hilarious! It's a film that really puts into perspective how ill-intentioned and ill-conceived this entire thing was as a cinematic universe. And what's worse, while Venom doesn't really work without Spider-Man, while Madam Web is a film that nobody wants to watch, while Morbius, again, doesn't work without Spider-Man, especially doesn't work with those post-credit scenes, Kraven is someone that actually works on his own. This is a compelling, fully fleshed out 3-dimensional character that has his own world and lore and existence outside of his feud and rivalry with Spider-Man. There is so much that can be done with Kraven the Hunter. There is a basis for a revenge story here, and they butchered all of it. Aaron Taylor-Johnson is in the best shape of his life. This man is a physical specimen in this film. He became Kraven the Hunter. And this was all he worked for. Everyone involved with this is worthy of praise just to have put up with this bullshit for 3 years at this point. It is a disaster. And there's no better word to describe what Kraven the Hunter is as a film. But what I will say for Kraven the Hunter is that there is some fun brutality in some of the action set pieces, particularly in the final 10 minutes, where it's just Kraven the Hunter running around in a forest, Logan style, killing fools very violently. There is flashes of fun to be had in that sequence. There's also flashes of fun to be had in the rest of the movie, but that's just because the ADR is so awful. There is such a lack of cohesion in the performances, in the storytelling, in the tone. The performances range from bizarre to tonally deaf and absolutely hilarious. You have no idea why any of these characters are in the film. The film has been described as a revenge story, and that's just not true, because you have no idea what Kraven the Hunter is avenging. Lines will be spoken in this film over and over again for 2 hours and 7 minutes. I believe that's the longest runtime in any of these movies. And all these lines that are just repeated, they are just to emphasize what the characters are, make them all so one-dimensional. And we're not even talking about the specific lines yet, which are hilarious. Proving beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is not what audiences are craving. It's clumsily written, poorly edited, and devoid of any charm, which is shocking because it features an ensemble beyond talented. Aaron Taylor Johnson is arguably the perfect choice to play Kraven the Hunter. Russell Crowe is an Academy Award winner, one of the greatest actors to ever live. Arian DeBose won her Best Supporting Actress Oscar for West Side Story and immediately went from that to this. She won her Oscar 3 years ago. Christopher Abbot is one of the best up-and-coming actors. We'll talk about whatever he's doing here. And Alessandro Nivola, who is featured in one of the best films of the year at the moment, The Brutalist, is doing arguably the most interesting take on Rhino, except by the end, the Rhino looks like this. You seriously cannot make this up. Red Hechinger, who was just in Gladiator 2, and full disclosure, this is just an actor who does nothing for me on screen, playing Dimitri, the Chameleon. You know what the Chameleon does in this film? He does voice impressions. He lip syncs to songs. That's how they build up the final reveal where he fully becomes the Chameleon. His ability is to do voice impressions. When he calls his brother and he picks up and he thinks it's his father talking, it's just then revealed that it's his brother pulling a joke. The Rhino is a guy who went through an experimentation to not feel pain, and instead, by becoming the Rhino, he feels nothing but pain. So he has this backpack where he injects into his abdomen, into his ribs, and just keeps him in normal human form. And you know how they build up this transformation into the Rhino? It's exactly that. He just has this backpack, and when he takes it off, his skin starts transforming, which is hilarious that that part actually looks visually good. The VFX are well done on that, but then, and let me just remind you, the Rhino looks like this. This is a film that has been shooting since 2022, where last year, or even this year, I believe, they went back for another extended round of reshoots to improve the film, to improve the story. Having seen the final result, what were they improving? I want to see that version of the film, because you can see where the reshoots happened. Lines of dialogue where people are just shot in the back of the head so you don't see the mouths moving. Where Aaron Taylor Johnson in the opening sequence is speaking Russian to someone else, and it actually sounds pretty good until you look at his lips and you realize how awful the ADR is. This is not another Madam Web situation. They actually hit it rather well throughout most of the film. Like I said, there is brutality, fun brutality, but then you will see him throughout this film running on all fours throughout the London streets, after cars, after people, and it's hilarious. I don't know how many movies need to do this until filmmakers and honestly studios, I don't even blame JC Chandler, I feel sorry for him in this situation. Film studios need to realize that wide shots of people running on all fours like they were animals does not look good. It doesn't make your character look imposing or big, it makes them look ridiculous and pathetic, but also hilarious. It is such a formless attempt at a story that doesn't make sense, where you can see them trying to cram puzzle pieces together that clearly do not belong together. How Calypso is inserted into this film from the start is absolutely hilarious, where she just so happens to be visiting her grandmother in Africa at the same time Kraven, as a young boy, is with his father and his brother on a hunting expedition. While this is happening, Calypso just so happens to be interested in her grandmother's tarot cards, and her grandmother, for some reason, just so happens to give her a liquid that she is very vague about what it does. And so Calypso goes out there, not hearing a lion, not seeing what's happening to Sergei, but she just goes out there and just so happens in all of Africa to stumble upon Kraven being half eaten by a lion. And of course, some of the lion's blood, literally one single drop of the lion's blood, who was shot while he was being bitten by Kraven's father, happens to fall upon one of his open wounds, and he gets given this liquid, which revives him and gives him animal abilities, which are hilarious, because you will see Aaron Taylor Johnson sneaking around behind people, and his eyes will turn yellow, like the lion, and the film really wants to remind you that those yellow eyes are the eyes of a lion. So this dude is like an animal. Arian DeBose gets given lines like, "I don't like the feel of this at all." Or lines like, "My grandmother died shortly after that trip. I haven't seen her since." That's how death works! We don't need an explanation for how death works. Christopher Abbot shows up halfway through this film, and it feels like so much of his presence was cut short, where it doesn't make any sense how he's injected into this film, where he's playing the Foreigner, a character who exists in the comics, who's been married to Silver Sable, another character Sony wanted to make a solo movie of, and he has none of the superpowers he has in the comics. You know why? Because he doesn't have any superpowers in the comics. He has this strange ability where if he looks you in the eye, so he always wears sunglasses unless he wants to use his power, he takes off his sunglasses and just goes 1, 2, 3, and it's alluded that like time stops or people can't move or they lose consciousness, so suddenly he's just behind them, but his powers are never explained. He has such a cool power. He's completely dominating Kraven in their one and only physical confrontation in the film. In fact, their only confrontation, period. These guys have never seen each other before. Obviously, they don't see each other after because they die. It's Calypso who kills him. Calypso, the character who throughout this film has been saying, "I don't kill people, I'm a lawyer, and I will not help you kill people." And she just suddenly is really good at bow and arrow because, and again, this is a literal line in the film, she did it at summer camp once. But it's never answered what she actually does. So are you a lawyer who doesn't kill people, or did you actually kill people before? Because you're strangely good at this. There's also a plot line, and remember the word plot line. There's a very specific reason I'm not calling it storyline. There's a very specific reason I call this film absolutely formless. There's a plot line introduced, again, on the latter half of the second act, where Kraven has been trying to replicate that serum throughout all his life. That is not introduced once he meets Calypso and as an adult. That is not introduced at all while we see him at home, isolated in northern Siberia, where he chose to self-isolate himself from the rest of the world. And suddenly, because he cannot replicate that serum, because he doesn't know what's in it, Calypso doesn't know what's in it, but once the Foreigner actually kills Kraven, she just has another vial of the liquid. Apparently she's had it all her life, even though her grandmother only gave her one, And she died shortly after and she never saw her again. Shit just happens. And I feel immensely sorry for this entire cast. I feel immensely sorry for JC Chandor. This is the director of A Most Violent Year. This is the director of Triple Frontier. And this poor, immensely talented filmmaker comes across with Kraven the Hunter like someone who has no idea what directing is, has no idea what a film is. And that is all due to studio interference. This film doesn't come across like it's edited by editors. This film doesn't come across like it was written by writers. This film doesn't come across like it was directed by a director. This was corporate mandated just because they needed to regurgitate something out. And this is what we get. One of Spider-Man's most promising, most infamous, most compelling villains. And he's a ridiculous man who just runs around London like this. Did you think I looked stupid doing that? Cause Kraven looks even stupider doing that. Not to mention, and I realize how ironic this sounds coming from me, 80% of Kraven the Hunter is set in contemporary London. There is not a single person with a British accent in this film. There's a sequence in this film where Kraven is just going up the elevator with a random dude who's very intimidated. And it's funny because that scene is ironically from Spider-Man 2. That's the biggest direct association this film has with a Spider-Man film. It rips off of Mad Max. It rips off of freaking Gladiator. Also, by the way, before I forget, there's no post-credit scene. They didn't even bother. How it moves from one sequence to the next, how characters come together and meet each other makes no sense. The first hour of this film, there's absolutely no story. The film starts with Kraven breaking and entering into a prison to kill someone and then breaking out. It goes into a 24-minute backstory sequence where he gains his power, where I talked about all that. So an hour into the film, because Kraven the Hunter killed that prisoner in the first 8 minutes, there's a power vacuum in the gangster landscape in London, where no one has a British accent. And so Alessandro Nivola, Alexei, aka the Rhino, kidnaps Dimitri to get at their dad, and so Kraven goes after Alexei because of his brother. While the foreigner is also here because apparently he was hired by Alexei, but then once he meets Alexei later into the film, Alexei has no idea who he is. And we get this exposition dump about how Kraven the Hunter killed the foreigner's mentor. This entire film is characters spouting lines and events just unfolding because the script says so. Because it has no liveliness, because it has no dynamism, because it has no energy onto itself. It also looks dull as shit. I don't ever want to hear complaints that the MCU is colorless. This shit is colorless. This shit is just brown and gray. So by the end, after the Rhino dies, turns out Nikolai paid Alexei to kidnap his son Dimitri, who by the way is a bastard. Everyone keeps saying he's a bastard, but it doesn't really fucking matter. And this was all a plan just to find Kraven, just to bring Kraven back into Nikolai's life. And at the end, Kraven gets a bear to fucking kill his dad. I'm not even joking. And once he meets Dimitri, he is now the chameleon. And the explanation for this is that he found a doctor in New York. Is this something that happened earlier in the film? Kind of. The exact same thing happened earlier in the film. The whole skin situation with Alexei the Rhino was because he literally just mentions in one line to Dimitri, oh, I found this doctor once, but things didn't go well, so now I'm the Rhino. And now he's suddenly the chameleon. There's a moment where he turns his face into Aaron Taylor-Johnson's face, and it looks about 100 times worse than skinny Chris Evans in the first Captain America 13 years ago. The final scene of this film, however, even though Dimitri is now mad at Sergei, at Kraven the Hunter, he says, oh, by the way, Dad left you something. The head of the lion that almost killed Kraven, that his dad put up in a mantle against the wall, the father who he hates and kidnapped his brother, and resulting in this whole mess happening, left him a present. And Kraven takes it. And the final moment of this film is Kraven putting on the vest, showing his 100 abs once more and sitting down looking in the mirror. Duh. Thank you very much for the vest, Papa. I will enjoy it. Wait a second, I live in Siberia. It's fucking cold there. I'm not just wearing this. Fuck this shit. Remember that first poster that came out with them announcing Kraven the Hunter that we actually thought, oh, that's actually pretty cool. That's the final shot of the movie. That's how this entire cinematic universe ends. This cinematic universe filled with Spider-Man villains where there is no Spider-Man. This film really wants you to remember that these characters are related to Spider-Man without actually saying it out loud, as if they didn't fucking own the rights to the character. It's embarrassing. It's absolutely disastrous that a film like this exists, that these 6 movies were made and regurgitated out in the way that they were, with so much talent in front and behind the camera. This is the same studio that put out Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse. This is the same studio that finances the Spider-Man movies in the MCU. What happened? How did it come to this? It makes no sense. I definitely sound like someone who is going insane right now. You're probably asking yourself, Ren, I thought you said Kraven the Hunter was the most enjoyable out of the Spunk movies. How can that be? Because every creative choice, if we can call it creative choices, make this film worse. The dialogue is hilarious, full of first draft energy. The logic, non-existent. The ADR, a character on its own, basically. You are not able to invest in any of these characters. These characters are not able to invest in any of this story because the story does not exist. Kraven the Hunter does not have a story. It has a lot of plots, it has a lot of plot lines, but nothing comes together. Nothing has a sense to it in this absolutely abysmal farewell to a cinematic universe that no one ever asked for. So now it's time for you to start the conversation in the comments below about Kraven the Hunter and the Sony Spider-Man-less Spider-Man universe. What was your favorite moment? Rank all the films. Have you seen Kraven the Hunter? Are you now more excited to see it than I went on this insane diatribe for however long this video is going to be? Anything and everything down there. If you're enjoying this review, I reviewed all the Spunk movies right up here as well as many other films. If you want to stick around to talk more movies and TV with me, this is the place to be. Consider clicking that subscribe button and you won't miss any future conversations on your favorite movies and TV. Kraven the Hunter is an abysmal showcase of studio interference that butchers all the excitement and liveliness out of one of Spidey's greatest foes. This is a sensational feat of embarrassment that results in an unintentionally hilarious and entertaining waste of talent and story. R.I.P. Spunk. You will not be missed. I'm giving Kraven the Hunter a D+. Thank you so much for watching, film family. I had a blast doing this review, about just as much as I had watching Kraven the Hunter. I hope you had a blast watching it as well. Remember to start the conversation down there, and I'll be back very soon with more reviews for Mufasa, We Live in Time, and a few of the last films of the year before the top 10 best and the top 10 worst. I hope to see you in those, so until then, love each other and love the movies.